We're ready to go in 3, 2.
Good afternoon to anyone who may be listening online. This is High Point Mayor Jay Wagner calling to order our special meeting for today. There is a quorum present here at Council Chambers. I am present, as are Councilman Moore, Williams, Hudson, and Jones. We expect at least a couple more to trickle in as the meeting goes on. Purpose of this meeting today is for an overview of our redistricting process, and staff is handling that, so I'll turn it over to our city manager, Ashalena Ford.
Thank you, Mayor. For our special meeting today, we have our consultant who's with us with Corner and Sproul to talk about the criteria associated with redistricting. So at this time, I would ask Ms. Caroline Mackey if she would come forward, and we'll start with the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. Good to see you all again. You may remember we were here 2 weeks ago to talk about an overview of the process and a timeline for the process. And we said we would be back in 2 weeks to talk about the criteria that this council wants to use to instruct us in creating new redistricting plans for your consideration. And that is why we're here. I'm not gonna rehash everything that I did 2 weeks ago, but just to provide a little bit of context. This is a map of your existing plan. You can see the population figures. The 2020 population is 114,059 people based on the equal one person, one vote requirement and the equal population requirement. The ideal ward size is 19,010 people. And when we apply that plus or minus 5% rule to that number, that means every ward needs to have somewhere between 18,061 and 19,959 people in it. And the next slide here shows you where the current wards are in comparison to that ideal size. So wards 1, 3, and 4 are within that plus or minus 5% range. Wards 2 and 5 are a little bit too small, too low in population, and Ward 6 is a little bit too high in population. Before I get into the guiding principles, let me just remind you that redistricting is something that every local government with districts has to do every 10 years. It's up to the council to do it. You can engage staff, you can engage consultants, and you should engage members of the public in that process. And we've got a timeline at the end so you can see the opportunities that we've built into the process for that public engagement. But ultimately, it is up to council to select a plan and to vote on it, and then we'll help you get that plan into place. So as we get started with putting together some options for your consideration, we want to talk tonight about the instructions that you want to give us. So why don't I just go through the list quickly and just briefly explain what each is, and then we'll open it up to discussion. And I do have an email, and so I know that there's been some early discussion and consensus building, which may be able to expedite some of this. It doesn't seem like there's much disagreement about it. So the first is equal population. That's required. We do it based on total population. The second one is contiguity, and that's just that all parts of the ward should, to the extent possible in a city, touch one another. Consideration of certain administrative boundaries. That's an easy example is using whole precincts as building blocks. And your existing plan does do that. There are some precincts that are split between the wards, but generally the precincts are the building blocks. The next is whether to consider incumbency and how to consider it. And then lastly, the next one is preserving the core or ignoring the existing wards and starting from scratch. And these two are listed as and or because we can give you options. And we can give you as many plans as you'd like to see. Next, we've got communities of interest, and that's something that you all should tell us about what communities are important and if there are any that should be preserved and kept intact in certain wards. Then seeking to have boundaries follow visible physical features like roads, waterways, and geographic features. That's pretty self-explanatory, but if there's a major road or train tracks or something that should be a dividing line between the wards, then we can certainly take that into account to the extent possible. Next is compactness and just how compact, how close to a circle or a square is the district. There are measures of compactness. There's a lot of different measures, but generally the accepted principle is just the eyeball test and looking at the shape of the district. Next, we've got plan for population changes. And what this means is because these districts will last you for 10 years, if you know of certain parts of the city that are likely to grow or likely to decline in population, or even places that maybe aren't accounted for in the census data, since the census is a snapshot as of April 2020, you can direct us as to anything like that, and we can do our best to accommodate it. So with that, let me turn it back to you all, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about these, or we can talk about the consensus that council may have for some of them.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about any of those items before we move forward?
If we could go back to the slide that shows the breakdown of populated, that's what I'm looking at. So 5 and 2 are short.
Correct.
Trying to give me more doors. Thank you.
Okay. So when we met 2 weeks ago, I gave everybody the opportunity to kind of chip in and tell us what they were thinking. I didn't hear anything for a while, so I sent an email out to the council, and a consensus has developed. I did get a response from 7, including myself, 7 of the 9 council folks who were all in agreement. Nobody expressed any disagreement. I just did get a response from 2 of the 9. But the consensus seems to be to continue the existing system we have, which is mayor and 2 at-large seats in 6 wards. I think there's agreement around contiguity as much as possible. We would also like to keep precincts whole as much as we can. I think the precincts a lot of times are most of the time I think are built around neighborhoods. So we feel like splitting precincts would split a lot of neighborhoods. No double bunking. We would like to also preserve the core of existing wards because it appears that from this anyway that only maybe some minor changes need to be made. I mean, to be able to achieve the balance that we need. And we also feel that the wards encompass current communities of interest as well. And then there was also a line in here about possibly producing a blank slate version just for comparison's sake.
Sure.
And so there seems to be a consensus around that. If I've spoken incorrectly, y'all jump in.
Yep.
Yes.
Here, hop up.
If a blank slate version were done, you would still want, am I right in assuming that you would still want all the districts to avoid double bunking incumbents,
Yeah, I think so.
even with a blank slate
That's right.
version? Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have, or can you provide a map like this one that includes, it doesn't have to be every detail, but includes areas or landmarks or neighborhoods of the, like an aerial shot within this, besides just the lines. Does that make sense?
You mean, like a Google Earth type map?
Yeah,
You can see-
I mean, well, or a map that we can transpose out of what we have to show where streets or neighborhoods or landmarks, I mean,
We may
here,
have that already. Do we have that already?
I'm thinking that we may, it's just not in the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you can probably access it.
I mean, personally, I don't know these wards by their number. I know them based on where you vote, where the polling place is. So, you know, it may be that we can, I know we can get a map that shows each polling location.
Yeah, so sort of two responses to that. One is we can probably get a lot of that information from the planning department and
Right.
provide an overlay to map out polling places, or we've even done it in places where we get a file of all the neighborhoods
Right.
that the planning department has, and those can be overlaid with
Okay.
it.
All right.
As part of this process, we'll put together an interactive map that will work like Google Maps. You can zoom in and zoom out, and you can see the districts, and you'll be able to see comparisons between the different plans and the existing plan. And you can type in any road, and it'll go right to it to see the different options.
Okay, thanks.
And one of the things that we could do on the interactive map, if you're interested, is to add points where polling places are.
Yeah,
If you wanted to see that with labels.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted maybe to see some other kinds of buildings or features. We had a school board, we did something with the school board once, and they wanted to see where all the schools were.
Yeah.
So that may not be a concern of yours, but you might have something else like that.
And I can email you one thing with District 5 that's a little, if it's got to grow anywhere, and I wish Michael was here, so I don't want to mess him up in any way, but there's one neighborhood where the right side of the street's 5 and the left side of the street's 6, so it would make more sense if that were cleaned up a little bit so that that one area geographically, I mean, it's on the map, like an inch above this H27, if you just look straight north, that one neighborhood, I can get you the street that I'm talking about, but I accidentally campaigned against Jason Ewan in 2017, not knowing that I was in his neighborhood, but that's just one thing that could be cleaned up a little bit geographically.
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of times we think, well, we want roads to be divisions, but if the road is the division, that means the district line goes down the middle of the road.
Yeah, major
And-
roads I'm cool with, I think like Eastchester or something like that, but when you're in an actual small neighborhood, this side being 5 and this side being 6, it can be quite confusing for us and for, more so for the electorate. They don't know who their council representative is based on the neighborhood.
That's helpful. And I mentioned before that the smallest unit that we can use to put together the maps is a census block. And so it may not be as simple as just taking the other side of that street. We may have to go,
You have to take the whole census block.
yes, wherever that census block line
Yeah,
is, we have to
there-
take all of it.
There's a whole lot in that area that could be, to get you that 1,000 you need for Ward 5, just in that Sandy Ridge, Kendall area, that geographically, it makes more sense that it would be 5 versus 6.
Okay. And you said that's in H27, I see H27. A
Above
and B.
more SDRI.
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 It's in that SDRI area.
Okay. Got it.
You remember the street name, Dave?
I'll get it, and I'll email it. If I have your email, I'll get it to you, or I'll email it to Tasha or Jay or something. I'll probably think of it in about 5 minutes, but. So I'll look it up.
Okay. So we have consensus. We'll put together a couple of plans, a couple of options that keep the core, and then we'll do a blank slate just for comparison purposes. So I know that you mentioned that the current wards keep intact the communities of interest and compactness and some of those things. Is there any interest, or do we want to talk about planning for any future growth or anything that should be considered maybe in the blank slate plan?
It's Alderbrook, by the way. Alderbrook, Alderbrook Drive.
Alderbrook,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
ALDER?
You know, I don't necessarily know that that we're expecting explosive growth in any certain part of the city in the next 10 years. We've had pretty measured growth, you know, over the last few decades, where I don't think we've had to do major things. And, you know, and it's not like, I mean, we can't go in and annex and close all these donut holes, so.
Right.
You know, and so that's not gonna happen where it would cause a big change. I don't think we're anticipating any major large-scale annexation. Staff, any major large-scale annexation on the way, that y'all think of? Yeah, I can't really think of anything.
And these numbers show that you've had pretty consistent growth
Yeah.
over the last 10 years. We don't have,
Yeah, I mean.
Huge
I don't
changes.
think we're gonna get 50,000 more people in the next 10 years or anything. It's gonna screw us up.
okay.
I worked in Raleigh in the 1990s when Cary went from a crossroads to a city, and North Raleigh did the same thing, and I don't think we're anticipating that.
Right.
I wouldn't put it past, though, the trend of the past couple decades of your growth taking, of course, we're working somewhat against that and redeveloping downtown, but the trend has been for it to be somewhat close to arteries, you know, major access arteries for work, travel, et cetera. So
5 and 6 has been where most of the growth has been in the
You're welcome.
last couple of decades. What's that?
So you're welcome.
Yeah, 5 and 6 has been where a lot of the growth has been growing towards Greensboro and towards the airport. Although a lot of that land up there is reserved for industrial development, so, you know, although it might get annexed, I don't know if it's gonna bring a whole lot more people into the city.
Right. Right. Okay.
And there's still been major growth in 6 since the census. I mean,
Yeah.
6 is, residentially, 6 is the busiest,
Okay.
the most growth. Continues to be.
Yeah. And probably, I mean, I don't know what the population, do you have the population figures from 2010 to 2020 broken down by ward?
Not by board.
I mean, I would say 5 is probably still grown, it just hadn't grown as fast as 6, you know?
Well, they were pretty close to even 10 years ago, so you can see some are smaller and some are bigger.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I make the point about getting the names, getting the addresses?
Oh, yes. Since we will make sure that all the incumbents stay in their own wards,
yeah.
we do
The
need
addresses.
addresses, yeah,
Okay.
before we can get started.
And they would need to be the residence addresses where you live, where you're registered to vote. And I could probably look those up, but I don't want, you know, I want to get it from an official source,
The
so I
mayor-
can
mayor
rely
will
on
do it,
that.
Chief.
Okay.
I won't broadcast it, but, you know, it's already a public record. Those addresses are already a public record on the voter register, on the Board of Elections website, so.
you think I gave a manager my address?
You're at large, hush.
Mr. Mayor, how many meetings are we gonna have? Because I know we got 4 council members missing.
There's, as part of the presentation, there's a list of future meetings, if we can get to that slide.
Okay. Just wanna make sure
So-
they get a chance to have some input too.
Yeah, we'll be back next month with some maps to look at. And we can likely get those to Tasha and have those circulated and put out publicly before the meeting so that folks have a chance to look at it and you all can hear from constituents and from voters. The process that we've put into place is we've got plenty of time. There's plenty of chances for us to talk about it, to talk about changes, for you to hear from members of the public and for them to get involved. We are going to present plans next month and then give you all a little over a month to look at and digest and talk to people and get back to us with any requested changes. And then in January, our thought is that we sit down, Bill has his computer, we hook it up to the screens, and you all and members of the public can see, okay, can we make this change? Is this feasible? Or does it put us over the population, the plus 5%? That sort of thing, and really work through the requested changes. And then we'll present those again. Then they'll go to a public hearing. If we need to make changes after the public hearing, we've got almost a month in there that we can do that. We've gone back to the computer, after presenting to boards and to councils, and gone back and looked to see, okay, can we make this change? And then come back and said, okay, we can't, or we can, and, changed it on the fly. So there's plenty of time in this schedule to get your input and to get input from the public. If you want to add public hearings in there, you can. If you want to print maps and put them out in the lobby, you can do that. We'll have the interactive map, which hopefully you all will publicize and folks can go and really drill down and see the changes. So I think that's it on timeline. Any questions about that?
Outside of public hearing, I'm sure if people have some input between now and then, they could come to a regular public comment period and voice their, yes.
Yep. Okay. Well, anybody, you have anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Anybody else got last chance for questions till November? Well, in an official meeting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
One other thing to mention as it relates to providing feedback, I think during our first presentation, Caroline asked that if there were questions or suggestions that members of council had, if they would email those to the clerk, and then those would also be shared with our team members. So if things come up after we've left our meeting today or questions about specific areas, then those can be shared between now and when they're back in November as well.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. That was the only thing we had.
2 items for attorney-client.
Okay. Can we do those? We didn't, I don't know if did we notice for a closed session?
No, but
Okay. Okay, so I'll make a motion to suspend the rules to add a couple of items for closed session consideration. I think you said attorney, they're both under attorney-client privilege?
They are.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of suspending the rules to add those 2 items, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we've added those 2 items. So I'll need a motion to get then to go into closed session.
So moved. Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to go into closed session for the purpose of attorney-client privilege. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Okay. Well, are we alive? So we're back out of our closed session, and we have no further business for this special meeting, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes, and we're adjourned, and we'll reconvene at 5.